It was a stormy night, with rain and wind lashing against the windows. Emma was alone at home, her parents having left on a business trip. Her only companion was an old black cat, whose eyes seemed to reflect every flicker of lightning. Despite being brave by nature, the eerie atmosphere of the night made Emma feel uneasy. She tried to focus on the suspense novel in her hands, but the howling wind and rattling of branches against the glass kept pulling her attention away. The black cat perched silently on the sofa, occasionally casting its gaze toward the window, as if sensing something out of place. Emma stood up, walked to the window to reassure herself that there was nothing there, and returned to the sofa. Just as she was about to sit back down, the phone suddenly rang, piercing through the silence of the room. She jumped, almost dropping her book. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to calm down and picked up the phone. "Hello!" A deep, raspy voice spoke from the other end, cold and chilling. "I see you." Emma froze, her grip tightening on the phone. She scanned the room quickly, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. She tried to maintain a firm voice. "Who is this? Stop joking around." There was no response from the other end, only the sound of low, unsettling laughter before the call abruptly ended. A few minutes later, the phone rang again, this time louder and more insistent. Emma hesitated, then picked up. The same voice, more menacing than before, spoke. "I'm right outside your door." Cold sweat trickled down her back. She walked to the door and peeked through the peephole, but all she could see was darkness and the distorted shapes of trees swaying in the wind. Her hands trembled as she stepped away from the door, trying to shake off the dread creeping over her. When she turned back to the living room, the phone rang for the third time. She picked it up, and the voice whispered in her ear, "I'm inside." The phone slipped from Emma's hand, her entire body freezing in place. Her eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for any sign of an intruder. The old cat stood on the sofa, its fur bristling, eyes wide and fixed on the hallway with a low, throaty growl. Fear surged through her veins as she realized something was terribly wrong. She moved cautiously to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, her palms slick with sweat. She crept through the hallway, her breath held, as if any sound might draw attention. Every creaking floorboard seemed deafening in the silent house. At the end of the hallway, one door hung slightly ajar, moving slightly with each gust of wind. She pushed it open, her knuckles white from gripping the knife. The room was empty. Trying to steady her breathing, Emma returned to the living room. The phone rang again, each ring echoing through her mind. She picked up the receiver. "I'm right behind you." She spun around, her heart pounding, but there was no one there. Only the old cat, sitting motionless on the sofa, its green eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. She sighed shakily, telling herself it was all a prank. She dialed the police, but just as she was about to press the final digit, the doorbell rang. Slowly, Emma walked to the door. Through the peephole, she saw a familiar figure standing in the rain. It was her father, drenched and wearing a gentle smile. Relieved, she opened the door. "Emma, why aren't you asleep?" he asked. "Dad?" Her voice was uncertain. Her father explained that his flight had been canceled due to bad weather, so he came home early. She helped him dry off and led him inside, but a nagging feeling of unease refused to leave her. As they talked, she recounted the strange phone calls. Her father listened attentively, then reassured her that it was likely just a prank call. Yet, as they spoke, she began to notice small inconsistencies. Details about his mannerisms, his tone, and his behavior were subtly different. It wasn't enough to be obvious, but just enough to raise the hairs on the back of her neck. The old cat never took its eyes off her father. It hissed softly, its body tense, as if preparing to pounce. That night, Emma decided to test her suspicions. She feigned tiredness and went upstairs, but instead of sleeping, she pressed her ear to the door, listening intently. The old cat prowled outside her room, pacing as if to draw her attention to something. It led her to the end of the hallway, where the floorboards seemed looser than elsewhere. Gathering her courage, she pried open a hidden panel, revealing a narrow passage leading down to a dark basement. Her heart pounded as she descended the steps, each creak amplifying her dread. The basement was damp and oppressive. She fumbled for the light switch and gasped at what she saw. Surveillance cameras, recording equipment, and stacks of documents lined the walls. Images of her daily life, meticulously documented notes, and recordings played on repeat. Someone had been watching her for a long time. A familiar voice echoed from behind. "You've seen too much." She turned to see her father standing at the top of the stairs, his face devoid of any warmth. Realizing she was in mortal danger, Emma knew she had to act fast. The imposter began descending the stairs, blocking her exit. He spoke calmly, almost mockingly, explaining that her house was just one node in a vast network of psychological experiments, meant to test and manipulate fear. At that moment, the old cat leapt at the man, its claws sinking into his leg. He stumbled, giving Emma a precious few seconds to break free. She bolted up the stairs and burst through the front door into the pouring rain. Desperation drove her forward. Just when she thought she couldn't run anymore, she heard the sound of sirens approaching. 2 police officers, responding to her earlier call, arrived just in time. The police searched the house thoroughly. In the basement, they found evidence confirming Emma's story, a sophisticated operation aimed at controlling and manipulating victims' minds. They promised to keep her safe and launch an investigation into the larger network behind the crimes. A few days later, Emma's parents returned home. Learning what had happened, they decided to stay with her for a while. Though life seemed to be returning to normal, Emma could never fully shake the unease. At night, she would hear faint whispers, feel eyes watching her from the shadows. The old cat remained vigilant, always staying by her side. One evening, just as she was about to drift off to sleep, the phone rang once more. She picked it up, her breath catching in her throat, and heard the familiar, chilling whisper, "It's not over." Thank you all for watching. Have you ever experienced a creepy phone call like the one in this story? Maybe you heard an unsettling voice on the other end? Share your experiences in the comments. Do you think it was just a prank? Or could it have been something supernatural? We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more chilling and spine-tingling horror stories. There's always more lurking in the shadows.